everybody, what's up and welcome back. If you're new here, I'm Liz, and today we're going to be discussing the Happy Face Killer, who is also known as his real name, Keith Hunter Jesperson. If you're new here, hey, I talk about true crime here on my channel. Yep. So if that piqued your interest, click that subscribe button, turn your bell notification on all. That way you know whenever I upload. Because if you've noticed, the last 4 videos were back to back. I have this one, and then I have, I believe it's like 2 or 3 more videos, and then we're going straight into Vlogmas. So I hope you're excited. The Vlogmas cold case files are coming. But yeah, so let's get into today's true crime case, shall we? Well, Keith Hunter Jesperson, he's actually currently serving 4 consecutive life sentences for all of the shit that he did. His crimes were so heinous, and he's dubbed the Happy Face Killer because of the way he taunted the media and the police. He sent them letters, and he would sign them with like drawings of smiley faces on many of the letters that he sent. And in these letters too, he often talked about the crimes he committed in a way to taunt them. What a nice man, right? Now, his modus operandi was strangulation, and he specifically targeted sex workers or transients who literally had no connection to him whatsoever. So it would be somebody that would have no tie to him, that it would be easier for him to get, rape, strangle, and just toss away like they were trash, as most serial killers do, unfortunately. I'm gonna get into like his childhood a little bit, and then we're gonna talk about his victims and kind of go from there. It might be a long one today, but I hope you guys enjoy. So when he was a child, he grew up in an extremely violent household. His father was violent, and he was a drunk. And his grandfather was also known to be very prone to using violence in their house. Now, he grew up kind of like the black sheep of the family. He did have 2 brothers and a sister, but he was odd and awkward, so they kind of just like bullied him for being the weird one out of the bunch. And he was also a very large child, like extremely large, ever since he was young. So I'll talk more about his size too as we get further into this. So he also didn't have like the best time fitting in with people either because of his size. People often found him really like intimidating. So he was by himself a lot. And this is when he really became drawn to like playing with animals or torturing animals, which is a clear indication, if you don't read about serial killers, that there's something else a-brewing in that brain, okay? So after his family moved to Sella, Washington, he had even more trouble fitting in due to his size, yet again. They often called him Igor. Specifically, his brothers would call him Igor, and then it just kind of like trickled and stayed with him until he finished school. And he did make some friends, but not all of these relationships were so like fruitful. They didn't last very long. And his brothers, yet again, did not help in this situation. They would bully him, and they would just be like the others that made fun of him all the time, which is kind of sad. He was a very shy, large boy. Like I already discussed, that he was a large kid, and he just liked to be by himself, and he would often get in trouble for doing things by himself. And as a result of him getting in trouble, he would also be savagely punished by his father. And some of the punishments that he receives was being beaten with a belt, and even one time he received electric shock as a treatment for the things that he did, which, I'm sorry, a lot of people grew up in households where punishment is a thing. That is extreme punishment. That's bringing it to like Gertrude Benezuski stuff right there. But I mean, she did that on a child that wasn't hers. This is his own dad, but I digress. So everything Keith went through kind of helped mold him into who he became. So the extreme measures that his father went through to punish him really resembles what he would do in the future. Now, as young as the age of 5, he captured and tortured animals, various animals. And then, but that's not all, he would also enjoy watching these animals that he would capture kill each other. And he would often feel such like a gratification from watching them do so. He felt so like intrigued, like, oh my God, I want more, I need more, which oftentimes is a thing when it comes to these serial killers. They see it, they want it, they need more, they need more, they need more. It's that tank that never gets full. Kind of like when people say it's like a love tank, but it's not full, and you just need more. You need to add more to it and more to it and more to it until you feel full, but it's kind of like that faux feeling of feeling full. It's really bizarre. Anywho, so like I said, this like exact feeling is what would lead him into into his future crimes. It would escalate to the point of how he would feel seeing a human die and him taking their life from them. He would love that feeling when he finally would try and do it. He did have 2 attempted murders when he was around 10 and 11. What I mean by that is he tried to kill 2 different boys, 2 separate occasions. Apparently, he tried to kill his friend Martin, but this act was halted by his dad when his dad pulled him away. By Keith's dad, not Martin's dad. When he was 11, this is when the second attempt took place, and this was just a year after the first attempt happened. Keith was swimming in a lake, and there was another boy that tried to kill Keith. This is what kind of like started this attempted murder thing. So he was holding Keith underneath the water, and then at some point, Keith started blacking out. And sometime after this attempt on Keith, which some things say it's a few days, some say it's not, he went to a public pool, and this is when Keith saw that same boy that tried to kill him. He then did the same thing to that boy, and he held him underneath the water until the lifeguard pulled the boy away from Keith. So there's no like denying that Keith did in fact endure a major amount of abuse in the majority of his lifetime, but he gave it back and then some to people that didn't deserve it. Even with this type of behavior that Keith had, he did in fact get married. He had 3 children. He had 2 daughters and a son. And to help support his family, Keith became a truck driver. Now, several years into his marriage with his wife would accuse him of having an affair periodically, and this is when random females would call their house. And I mean, how would you feel if a random ass female called your home asking for your husband? Unless I knew the female, that's a different story. But like, no, this is some random female that's trying to no. So this really caused a strain in their marriage, and eventually, after 14 years of marriage to his wife took their children, packed up their belongings, and moved them to Spokane, Washington, so they could live with her parents. And this all happened when Keith was out on the road. So I feel really bad for him because he couldn't even say bye to his kids before his wife took them from their house. Now, eventually in 1990, this is when they would get divorced. But you remember how I was talking about how big Keith was? Well, he approximately was 255 pounds and 6'7" in height when he hit age 35. Excuse my French, but that's a big bitch. That is a big dude. That's like Thorness, like Christensen size. He was a big dude too. Like, man. Or like Joe Metheny. Big dudes. And obviously because of his size, he wanted to work towards something that he really wanted to do. He really wanted to be a part of the Royal Mounted Canadian Police. That's what he wanted to do. But this goal and him working towards this would end because he injured himself, and it ended super abruptly. So after this is when he would go back to truck driving, and he would go back to trucking after he moved to Cheney, Washington. Now, after he got this job, he realized that shit, I don't have anything tying me down. I can travel all the time, and any suspicion from anybody about anybody he picks up and kills, he wouldn't have any, because he would be constantly on the road. There's nothing sending him back home. There's nothing tying him to specific places. He could be always on the go. Now, that's being said, let's kind of talk about his victims. So Tanya, or Tanja, I believe it's Tanya Bennett, she was 21. She was found on the 21st of January in 1990, and she was found near Portland, Oregon. She was strangled via manual strangulation. Manual strangulation is with hands, and her body was just kind of disposed of like garbage. Now, in Keith's confession, he talked about Tanya at a bar when they met, and then he invited her to his house that he was renting at the time. And After they got into an argument, he then strangled her to death, killed her. Claudia Doe was found on the 30th of August of 1992, so quite a time jump. She was found near Blythe, California, and she had been strangled and raped before she was strangled to death. But oftentimes when you read about serial killers, there will be a jump between victim number 1 and victim number 2, or sometimes victim number 1, 2, and 3. There will be a time jump, because at first, I'll get back into his other victims in a second, but at first when they start killing, their tank becomes full and then it will start depleting. And then after they kill the second one, it fills up super quick and it drains super fast. So then they need to start doing it back to back to back. And then oftentimes there will be some stops in kind of like their timeline of victims. And sometimes this happens because something in their life kind of hindered them. I talked about it a little bit with my John Joseph Joubert case, which is, I think it's the third video I put up, where he had a lapse in time, and it's mainly because he moved to a different state and he had a lot of like legal things happening at that time. But so Cynthia Lynn Rose was 32. She was found in September of 1992, and she was discovered in Turlock, California. Now, Keith claimed that she was a sex worker and that she tried to enter his truck when he was sleeping, and then this is why he killed her. Yikes. Lori Ann Pentland, she was found in November of 1992. Her body was discovered, and according to Keith, she was going to charge him double for the sexual activities that they had done together or they had engaged in, and when he refused to pay her double, she threatened him with calling the cops, and then he proceeded to strangle her to death. Nice man, right? So the Blue Pacheco Jane Doe, of who was identified as Patricia Skipple, she was the age of 45. She was found in June of 1993, and her remains were found on the side of California's State Route 152 in Gilroy, which is about 80 miles southeastern of San Francisco. And she was found at the Pacheco Pass. That's what it's called. Now, she got her name because of the Pacheco Pass, but she was also wearing blue clothing, so hence why she was named the Blue Pacheco Jane Doe. Now, I've talked about her a few videos ago. I'll put that in a card above, where she would be identified this year. She was identified on April 13th, 2022 as Patricia or Patsy Skipple. And initially when she was found, police thought that she died via drug overdose, but that was not the case. Keith eventually would admit that he killed her, but when he admitted that he killed her, he said that her name was something completely different, but it wasn't. And he admitted to killing her in a letter that he sent to the Clara County District Attorney's Office. And in the letter, he said that he sexually assaulted and killed an unknown female on a turnout on Highway 152, which is similar to where she was found. And after about a year after this letter was sent to the Clara County District Attorney's Office, this is when Keith pled guilty to killing Patricia Skipple, or to the Blue Pacheco Jane Doe. Suzanne Doe was found in September of 1994, and she was found in Crestview, Florida. Angela Soubries was found in January of 1995. She was only 21 years old. And then Julie Winningham, which is Keith's last victim, and she was discovered on March 3rd of 1995. And surprisingly enough, this was actually his girlfriend, of which Keith killed. So this one is kind of funky one, but so there's kind of controversy behind his victim number 1, Tanya Bennett, and the reason being is because, actually, let's just get into it. So early into the investigation of Tanya Bennett, a woman by the name of Laverne Pevlinick, read reports about Tanya's death and basically saw this as like, oh hey, it was her abusive boyfriend that killed her. It wasn't somebody else. So basically what she did is She called the investigators on the case and basically was like, hey, we're going to meet up and I'm going to tell you about what happened. And basically she was going to give a detailed story about how Tanya's boyfriend, John Sosnowski, was the one that murdered Tanya and then disposed of her body. Why she would think about this, I have no idea. But because of her doing this, as a result, Laverne and John would both be convicted of Tanya's murder. I don't know why, but they were both convicted, and after 5 years of them both spending time in jail, both of them were released, and this is because of Keith Jesperson's admission of killing Tanya Bennett. Now, I bet you're wondering how. After Keith got into police custody, if you will, or after he started sending letters, this is basically when the Tanya Bennett investigation was happening. He wrote a letter that gave information about certain items that were Tanya's that were never found at the crime scene, that only the killer would know where they would be. And it's not all, it wasn't only a letter. Keith wrote on a truck stop, like a wall of a truck stop. And then he signed it with a smiley face. And this was his initial confession of killing Tanya Bennett. Now, he got super pissed when that signed admission didn't cause any controversy or get the media's attention, and absolutely infuriated him. He was pissed off. This is what sparked him to write these letters to the media and to the police department, telling them that, hey, I'm the one that killed her. This is what happened. And this also included a 6-page letter that it ended up going to a news source in Oregon. I think it's called the Oregonian. If I said that wrong, I apologize. I'm not from the West Coast. I'm from New England. But and in this 6-page letter, this is when he gave the key details of each murder that he committed. Keith then signed each letter with a smiley face, hence the happy face killer. And after seeing these calling cards, this is when the media dubbed him the happy face killer. So ultimately, Keith would be arrested for the murder of his girlfriend, Julie Winningham. And this was on March 30th, 1995. This arrest happened about a week after they questioned him about her death. But at the time, they had no grounds to arrest him due to him being so unwilling to talk to them. But before he was arrested, Keith decided that, hey, I'm going to be arrested. I know they're going to arrest me. They're going to figure out everything I did. And then he tried to commit suicide, not once, but twice. And in these 2 attempts, obviously he failed. He then, after he was arrested, he had high hopes that if he talked about his diminished capacity or his mental state, that he would get leniency when it came to his sentence. No. Didn't help whatsoever. So while he was in custody, he did reveal more information in regards to some of the killings that he committed. Most of the information that he gave, a lot of it was recanted because a lot of it wasn't true. For me, reading about him, he reminds me of Henry Lee Lucas, because Henry Lee Lucas did the same thing. He admitted to a lot of murders that he never committed, and this pissed off a lot of people. Keith Jesperson is the same way, in my mind. It's the same. It really is. But all in all, Keith would be charged with murder. Also, after he was in custody, the police would talk to him about a letter that he ended up writing, and this letter was supposed to go to his brother. And in this letter, he detailed every single killing that he did, which was a total of 8 people over the course of 5 years. And with this letter, the police then were able to open up other cold cases that were around the country, basically, in hopes that this letter could tie him to these cold cases. At one point during his confession, hence why this reminds me of Henry Lee Lucas, Keith Jesperson said that he killed 185 people, but only 8 of these have ever been confirmed, and these were in Florida, Wyoming, Nebraska, Oregon, Washington, and California. He's a multi-state serial killer. That's what he is. Currently, he is serving 4 consecutive life sentences for 4 of the 8 murders that he did. He received 3 at first in September of 2009 in Oregon, but he was then extradited to California to be tried for another murder charge. This is when he received 1 life sentence in January of 2010. For his last sentence, obviously I said he was extradited to California. So basically then it kind of like depends on which state has more sentences of kind of where he would be, where he would reside for the remainder of his life. Personally, I think he should have the death penalty because you took their life, you should die. I'm sorry. A lot of people don't agree with the death penalty. I think it's something that needs to be brought back full force because not everybody can be rehabilitated. Jail is there for rehabilitation, not for somebody to sit on their happy ass for the rest of their life after they've killed 8 people. No. If you've killed people, I'm sorry. The eye for an eye thing still is the thing. You killed them, you should die. Anywho, what are your thoughts on Keith Jesperson? Leave them in the comments down below. I would love to know, and I will see you guys in my next video, which will be the Atlanta Ripper case. And then I also have Dr. No before our Vlogmas cold case files. So I hope you guys enjoy. I'll see you then.